This episode of the CMO Suite is brought to you by Uconnect. Uconnect provides digital solutions and teams to brands, CMOs, VPs, and marketers looking for true transparency in the biddable media space. From paid social and PPC to complex platforms like The Trade Desk, brands from across the world have connected to Uconnect. Visit them at uconnect.com. And No Kid Hungry. We're proud to promote No Kid Hungry and their many initiatives to help kids in needs of meals. No Kid Hungry helps kids be kids, not be hungry. Visit them at nokidhungry.org. And finally, we're proud that Season 3 of the CMO Suite is presented by the CMO Council.org as their official marketers podcast. The Chief Marketing Officer Council is the only global network of executives specifically dedicated to high-level knowledge exchange, thought leadership, and personal relationship building among senior corporate marketing leaders and brand decision makers. The CMO Council's 15,000 plus members control more than $550 billion in aggregated annual marketing expenditures and run complex distributed marketing and sales operations worldwide. For more information and membership, visit the CMOcouncil.org. Kat, let's start the show.
You're in the CMO Suite, the podcast for marketers who want to be in the know, presented by Connectivity Holdings.
Hello, and welcome to Season 3 of the CMO Suite. I'm your host, Sean Halter, and co-hosting with me today is the lovely Stacey Horton. Hello, Stacey.
Hello, Sean.
Thank
Great
you
to
for
be
co-hosting.
back.
Thanks. It's lovely to have you.
Woohoo!
We're in New York City. It's awesome. And Kat is over helping us to produce as well. How are things, Kat?
Things are going pretty smooth so far.
Kat was excited. Yesterday we had the CMO for the NHL, and so we got to talk plenty of hockey.
Yeah.
And today we're going to talk about all kinds of cool stuff. And Kat, just feel free to jump in because you're much smarter than I am when it comes to some
You
of this
got it. If hockey comes up again, I'm all over it.
You told me earlier that later on today you're heading over. You've got to do some production work for the Breakfast Club, correct?
Yes, sir.
So a lot less cursing on my show than probably on theirs. I would
mean,
take a guess.
fingers crossed.
Fingers are crossed. Well, listen, we're going to find out because right now my guest today is Eduardo Luz. Eduardo is the CEO of 8Greens. He's the previous CMO of Kraft Heinz, and we are incredibly excited to have him here today. 8Greens is an effervescent dietary supplement tablet packed with a proprietary blend of highly concentrated super greens with enough superfoods to give your healthy diet a green boost. Eduardo, how did I do on that intro? Did I fumble it? Did I do okay? Was I close?
Thank you for having me. No, you did okay. It's exactly that. It's a solution that gives you your daily green nutrition and keeps you on track.
And it's your first CEO position, am I correct?
Correct.
In your many years in this industry. And so the story of this podcast is kind of an interesting one because it's actually the second one that Eduardo and I have done uniquely. When he was the CMO for Kraft Heinz last year, we flew to Chicago. We did an episode, and then shortly after we produced it, because sometimes we produce these a little bit in advance, you and I were having a conversation, and you let me know, hey, I'm thinking of maybe making a bit of a life change. I'm thinking of making a market change. And so you and I had the discussion of maybe actually tabling that episode and waiting until you landed in this space to really be able to kind of dig into something interesting and different, correct?
Correct, absolutely.
So I'm going to try not to make you have to harken back too much to that, and we'll probably talk about some of the same stuff that we did back then. But that's unique for us, and certainly I appreciate you making the opportunity not only for being kind enough to have done the first one, but now we're making you do a second one.
No problem.
This one should be much easier though because
Sure.
we've got teams here to do
Right.
all this kind of stuff, and it's exciting because you're actually moving really into a role that I think a lot of CMOs out there envision as a step for them someday. You know, last year we were talking to a guest a little bit earlier. Last season was kind of all about the international. We did obviously an initial podcast with you. We had, I think, 8 countries represented last year with all these different CMOs. And this year, I think we've subtly decided that this season is going to be about hope. And so part of that is just because we know that it gets harder and harder for CMOs out there. They're trying to navigate this kind of crazy world. And I think what we are trying to do is to let them know that they're all on the same team. There is hope. There is opportunity. You can struggle and fail sometimes, but you're not alone. Is that a fair assessment, at least maybe to make?
I guess, yeah.
And so, Eduardo, remind me where you actually grew up.
So I'm from Brazil. You can see from this crazy accent, I grew up in Rio. I've been living in the U.S. now for 7 years. But I spent my whole, growing up in Rio, in Brazil.
And so I feel like when we talked last time, your first introduction to marketing came when you were in Brazil. Was it for Unilever?
Right. I work for Unilever in Brazil. But before that, I worked for Anheuser-Busch InBev in Brazil, in Europe. We moved around. But that was my first,
Your first real foray into marketing.
Exactly.
And then how did you end up at Unilever?
Unilever in Brazil, it's a very well-known company, as in the US, everywhere. That was an opportunity to run their personal care division in Brazil, and I had the opportunity to do that, and I took it.
And you took it. And how long did you end up staying there in Brazil?
Well, my career has been very much, outside of Brazil for total
Perfect.
points. Yeah.
Full
So, I would say I'll spend like 20% of my time in Brazil, and the rest outside. I lived in here, I live in Europe, so I have been traveling with my family a lot and moving. And Brazil is a special place, but it has been a long time since I operated there.
Since you've really been there. And I feel like, again, most of those, just to your point, most of those career stops along the way included some global aspect to them where you did have a lot of travel. That was part of that piece.
Right, which I don't enjoy, but sometimes part of the job. Yeah.
And how has that been? I know the last time we talked, you were in Chicago. I hope you don't mind that I was teasing you a bit from time to time because obviously you still kept a lot of the Brazilian accent to some extent. But when you would say, I would say, remind me where you're living now, and you'd say Chicago. So you had a very Chicago way of saying Chicago. You won't do it for me today, will you?
Somehow, Chicago. Yeah,
There you
yeah,
go.
there you go.
So then you made the leap from Chicago and New York. And so again, I think my point was just that your family's moved with you here and there along the way. You have kids as well. Am
I have three
correct?
kids. Yes.
And how old are they?
I have Francisco. He's 12, and then Elena Penelope is 7 and 5.
And so they've only kind of known that. They've only kind of known traveling to some extent, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Each one of them were born in a different continent. It's crazy. And
Where was your son born?
Belgium. I
Wow.
was with Anheuser-Busch InBev, and then Elena was born in Brazil. Was with Unilever, and Penelope was born in Pittsburgh.
So when you're born in Belgium, when your son is born in Belgium, is he a Belgium citizen? Is that
Not
how it
really.
works?
It's different from here. You have to be born from Belgian parents to be a citizen there.
And when you're working overseas, since you've worked over there for some length of time, and then you've also been here in the States, what are some of those? What are some of the biggest differences you feel like from your perspective now that your kids will live in the States probably more than they'll live in anywhere else? I'm sure this is hopefully your last stop for some time. You'll grow some roots here in New York City.
Right.
How is that? What are some of the differences you feel like is there or are there differences? Are they all regional? It's the same whether you move from one part of an existing country to another.
No, look, we love this country. We love the U.S. We, despite this accent, that we all citizens, including me, which is, is the most, in my experience, is the most welcoming place we have ever lived, and people don't care. People just embrace different people, and it's very easy to assimilate here. My kids are growing up as Americans, and we're proud of that. We love the values of this country, and yes, New York now is home, and we moved 2 weeks ago.
Welcome.
Everybody's adjusting to the new city and all that is exciting, and you take from there.
You've only been here a couple of weeks, and I already managed to drag you over to come on the show, which is insane. And as I want to do sometimes, I'm hopefully I'm not too relentless, but I am a little relentless. Like, hey, well, don't forget you said you come and join us on the show for the season opener. So that said, what an exciting time for you. Again, not to make you look back at your time at Kraft Heinz, but that was certainly a time that I remember you and I talking. You were responsible for so many brands, and it's a challenge for any human to be responsible for all that. And I remember, one of our conversations about they're almost like your kids in some way, and you want to make sure you give all of them as much attention as you possibly can. One of the stories I'm going to make you tell, if you don't mind for just a second, then I'll move off of Kraft, and I'm excited to talk about your time as CEO of 8Greens. But one of the interesting stories that you told me was, we were talking about the fact that these smaller brands, how do they get time? How do they get love? How do they get attention? How do they manage to create some ownership out in the market? And you were telling me a story about, I think, Country Time Lemonade. Do you remember that story?
Oh yeah, the
So-
principle is that great ideas are never a function of budgets, right? And the moment that teams understand that, it's liberating, because you say like people will fund good ideas, right? In the case of a Country Time Lemonade, it's was about what's the essence of the brand, what the brand exists, why the brand exists in the world, right? In some of those legacy brands, this is challenging because you kind of lose perspective of that. It's just familiar, has been there for a long time, and on that case, the angle was to protect kids who want to run lemonade stands. And funny enough, kids in the U.S. were being busted because they didn't have permits to operate.
Yeah.
And that's a true story. It happens every summer. And then the brand decided to be the champion of this little cause. And that creates a lot of good vibes and brand love out of that because it's simple, it's real, and it was something that happened not only in the world of communications and advertising, but also in the real world, right? The brand created a fund that will cover your fines if you're busted on a lemonade stand.
And so I think what I loved about that story is the fact that, again, to your point, Country Time Lemonade is this legacy brand. It's been around, I don't remember how long, but you had said it was, for quite a few years. And so how do you take something that's maybe a little old in the tooth and bring it up into contemporary standards and just make it fresh again?
Right.
I remember growing up, there were commercials for Country Time on all the time. And then it's interesting sometimes in the retail space that that budget either gets cut or it gets moved away or it gets moved to some other pieces. But you were able to take kind of a simple idea, something that was the zeitgeist of popular communication, and then really kind of roll that out there. And I think that's something that during your time at Kraft that you did a really great job of just either you and or your teams, obviously, because we know you don't work alone, of really being able to do is just kind of thinking what's top of mind and how can we create some buzz that's out there in the market.
Yeah, look, it's all on the team actually. I was just the PR person there, but the every time you can embrace culture and resonate what's happening culture, with the zeitgeist, it usually works no matter what, right? And that's the beauty of currently with 8Greens, right? You don't have to adjust anything; it's just completely aligned with the zeitgeist. People trying to stay on track, be healthy, etc. So it's a very easy job comparing to a legacy brand in that case.
And so talk to us, I want to make sure we spend some time on 8Greens. I want to stay on this same topic for just a second if we can, though, which is just talking about kind of this being part of the culture and figuring out what are those opportunities to be able to really take some ownership of what's happening out there in the marketplace. There's all of this buzz around Popeyes, right now. So they roll out a chicken sandwich, and then suddenly it's on everybody's talking about that. How does that happen? And I believe in talking to Fernando the other day, who's the CMO of Burger King. I think they're actually between CMOs right now at Popeyes. I'm not sure,
I don't know.
but how do you think that happens? How does a launch of a product like that? How does that just end up taking over culturally?
Yeah, look, sometimes it's luck. Sometimes you have the right timing, right? Sometimes by design. The success is very, very forgiving, right? But again, I think the recipe is to make sure that you have a message that resonates in culture. And I think the other part of the people sometimes forget is, more and more, I think brands should be doing things in the real world, not only talk about things, but do things, right? Acts, not is it necessarily just ads. Um,
Act, not ads.
right.
Yeah.
When you do that, usually in this day and age on social media, where news and things travel on social media, right? It's much more powerful because then people will talk about that, and they will use the act as a way of self expression. So you saw something that's cool, and because it's cool, you want to share with your friends, right? Very unlikely that you do that on a simple piece of ad. You probably do that with something that has probably a little bit more values or weight attached to that.
So it's interesting for those of us that have been doing this for some time. I'm actually going to say how old I just turned. I just turned 50, Stacy. 50.
Don't look at Sean.
Thank you, Stacy. My club age is it's
Uh,
gotten older. It's got to be 46 or
maybe
47 at this point.
42.
Thank you very much. You think about how long it took for us to get to that point, the point that you're just talking about, which is the fact that we don't we don't mind being sold to if it's content that's relevant to what we're looking for, but it took this long, this moment in our lifetime for that to finally kind of be there, whether that's a combination of because of the social media platforms that are out there or just the understanding from brands that really consumers don't want to be sold to. They want content that's relevant to them. I'll sometimes talk about the fact that on my Instagram feed, I don't mind an ad for shoes because I love shoes. I'd much rather have an ad for shoes or a conversation that's wrapped around shoes than something I don't have any interest in. And so maybe again, it's just this weird moment of time where all these things are kind of colliding together and consumers are getting maybe more of what they want and brands are trying to listen to that.
Yeah, look, I think a huge part of culture is people needing to express themselves and to show who they are through what they do and how they buy, etc. Right? Used to be the case that you would limit that behavior to fashion and things like that. Now people are extending that desire to everything they consume. So everything from the most simple things they consume every day. They want to have this little, mark of this is who I am. This expresses my values, etc. And then every brand, independently of category, needs to be expressing those values. And sometimes those values are polarizing, which is fine as long as you understand who you're trying to please and serve. But those values need to be explicit more and more.
And somebody described it once to me that we're kind of in this transition from push to pull. The push used to be the ads just got pushed out, and so they just hit you no matter who you were or kind of where you were. And now as consumers, we're pulling
Right.
the kind of ads that we're willing to accept, and we're rejecting those that we're kind of not. And really, ultimately, for anybody that's advertising, that's probably better because you're reducing the amount of waste of talking to people that maybe were never in your set in the first place.
I think so. It's just it's a great scenario if you are a challenger or a new brand because the playing field is more level. Very tough for incumbent brands because now there is no really barrier of entry or barrier of communication that used to be, and that makes just easier for more people to show up with a message.
And now, as you transition from CMO to CEO, that's got to be even more relevant. I know in talking to a lot of CMOs, again, sometimes the feeling is that a CMO is there to spend money and a CFO is there to keep them from spending money. Obviously, with some of your time at Kraft, that was very top of mind at the time of just how that zero-based financing and those kind of things work. But how is that now for you now that you're kind of up in that seat? And talk to us a bit about 8Greens and how the owner really started the company, because it's an interesting history.
Right. So the brand was founded by Dawn Russell. She had a very serious health issue when she was 25. She had cancer. And finding a solution, finding a cure, she became very knowledgeable of nutrition and all that. And she concluded that green nutrition is something that's really important to you to manage your health proactively. So she went into a mission to try to find a way to give this message and provide this green nutrition to people in the way that they can keep up with. Right? Everybody wants to be on track, but nobody really does that. The statistic is only 13% of Americans have their daily required greens every day. It's shocking, right? It's 13%, 1-3. So it took her really 5 years, hundreds of prototypes and products there, and she created something that's this tablet that is clean, is nutrient rich, is portable, it tastes great, and frankly, it's you get your green nutrition in less than 2 minutes. It's the most convenient thing out there.
You drop it in water or you take it as a tablet?
You drop it in water, right? And we are launching now, as we speak, a new form that is gummy, so that you just put in your mouth.
Yeah.
It's amazing, it's delicious. Imagine candy that's good for you. It's really really good. But that desire to be on track, to have your nutrition, and to have a proactive approach to your health, it's something that is really strong in culture these days. The issue is the solutions available. They are either cumbersome or expensive, or they're full of sugar. 8Greens have no sugar, and 10, 15 calories. It's very low calorie also. So it was an amazing solution that Dawn found. And our mission now in the company that I'm leading with the team there is to spread this message, right? To bring this message to more and more people, so that and not only in the U.S. but also internationally, because we believe it resonates everywhere.
And so how is, since it's fairly new, how is that transition for you from CMO to CEO? What's been the most challenging part of that?
Yeah, look, it's just a new angle, right? We have people in the company who are in charge of marketing, and it's an amazing job that they do there. For instance, yesterday we had Dawn on the Today Show, and we broke all the records of sales of the company because
Amazing, the power of TV.
She was in the show. She was talking about herself and about nutrition, etc., but also showing up 8Greens and her cookbook and all that. It broke our site. We sell direct to consumer, and The team is very proud of that, and so am I. The CEO is someone that has to define the vision, has to define the priorities, has to pick up the team, has to report to the board. So it's a different set of responsibilities from being a CMO. But so far, I'm having fun.
And how has that move been? You said you just made the move a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, yeah. I had been working remotely, commuting, and finally, my family came, which is great. We're all reunited in New York, living outside of the city, and yeah, so far so good.
For CMOs that are thinking, is there a next step, or what's that next step, or how do I position myself to be part of that next step, to be put into consideration for a CEO position? What advice would you give from that perspective?
Yeah,
What do you think got you into a position where you could throw your hat in the ring for a CEO position?
right. Look, any CEO position, your number one job is to grow the company, right? And nobody's more qualified to have the levers to go run a business and grow a business than a CMO, right? You supposedly you understand, the people you're selling to, your consumer, and that's a huge foundation uh, to get the CEO job, right? Of course, it comes with other responsibilities and sometimes not so exciting stuff, finance and operations, etc., that you have to have your heads around. But from a foundation perspective, if your number one job is to grow a business, nobody is better qualified than a good CMO.
Because these days the connection is tight or much tighter between sales and marketing and the understanding of that process.
It is, and some of the things, frankly, that you use to run the company on the back office, they are more commodity, right? The really the arts and science they meet more in front of the consumer, right? Because it's very hard to model behavior. You have to go deep to understand consumer behavior to unlock growth, and CMOs are probably uniquely equipped to do that.
You've made some great stops along the way with really some amazing brands, and I'm sure you've had some people who've helped inspire you along the way to have, to be in the position that you're in today. Is there somebody specifically that maybe you feel like really helped play a part in that growth for you?
Look, I try to learn with everybody I work with, right? So, a lot of people actually, nobody specifically, here and there, every day you get, nuggets of wisdom and you learn with people that you work with. And sometimes your peers, sometimes your people that work for you, not necessarily your bosses. And, I love to connect with people that I consider that can add this kind of dimension and value to my development for sure.
What's advice that you feel like you've given to somebody along the way um, that maybe you feel like is good advice for a CMO who's maybe kind of stuck right now, maybe just trying to feel like they're trying to find the passion for their product or their brand. Either maybe they're at a legacy group or their team's in transition. Is there advice you feel like you can give to somebody who's just trying to get up and get out and relearn the passion for this industry?
Absolutely. Look, I think it's a privilege to work and serve consumers, and usually you have a brand to do that, right? To me, it's basically two things, right? One, you have to spend time on the basic questions. Why this brand exists in this world, to do what, to whom, and those questions they seem, of course, obvious, but to really unpack those questions, especially for legacy brands, it's not easy. Then when you get to the answers to those questions, really move the marketing mix and realign with whatever answer you had, right? So many times you have one thing in your head, but the product and the packaging and the whole marketing mix doesn't, talk to what you have in your head as a CMO, and that gap is needs to be closed, right? And third, as I said before, great ideas are not a function of budgets. You can have an amazing idea; it doesn't cost anything. You just have to be, very open, talking to people, understanding what's out there. And sometimes the best ideas coming from nothing, and they really don't cost that much. And in this age of social media, messages just spread.
As we start to wrap this up a tiny bit, let's talk about social media. You talked about the fact that with 8 Greens, obviously it's an opportunity to kind of focus on health. Social media, for all of the good and some of the bad of it, it definitely does seem to kind of bring us even more front and center with our friends and our health and what we're doing with our lives. What role does social media play at this point with 8Greens, and have you been there long enough to be able to kind of dig into some of that stuff without, again, overstepping the existing marketing team that's already been doing a great job of building that brand?
Right. No, look, the brand has been growing exponentially in the past 2-3 years on digital channels. So the team is doing a great job there, starting with the founders. But everything can be improved, right? We believe that we have to improve the volume of our message and be present in more platforms. So far, it's mostly Instagram for us, but the message of 8Greens resonates with so many different platforms. It's an amazing solution for travel, because when you travel, you eat, badly, and you lose track of your nutrition. You carry that little tube with you, and you're set. In 2 minutes in a hotel, you're done. Great message for a LinkedIn platform, right? Our founder has a cookbook, which is incredible, and she has so many recipes in terms of how to cook with greens and 8Greens. Amazing for Pinterest, and we're not doing that today. So all those things are ahead of us, and it's exciting to go explore them, and that's probably going to be our path to expand platforms in volume on social media.
And so we'll wrap with just that part of it, which again is the fact that you're talking about the fact that the space is really flattened out. When you're direct to consumer, you have the opportunity to compete with everybody, and so that also must be kind of an interesting thing for you, having moved from a company that's so focused to being obviously at the store level, to now kind of transitioning again up to the CEO level in that direct to consumer space, and that also is exploding exponentially out there, the way that you talk to consumers and the way that you interact with them and their ability to be able to shop with you without having to really go into a storefront, will certainly make all of that interesting. Will you have to travel at all for this job?
Yeah. So the vision for our distribution is we'll continue to have a direct-to-consumer business, but we see ourselves in the future as more omni-channel. So we are talking to new retailers to expand selectively our distribution to complement our direct-to-consumer business. And frankly, and so I'm traveling for that, to go see people everywhere in the country, and very soon internationally. And the reaction, the reception to the brands and to the proposition has been outstanding, just because it's just legit. It's someone who had a problem and created a solution, and the solution resonates with so many people who want to be on track, but are just too busy to be on track.
And so how will you balance that with your kids? How will you make sure you're still there for all of the great and amazing moments for them here in the city as they get settled in?
Right. Look, I think it's possible. It's just, I have an amazing wife that helps a lot, and I try to plan my life to be there on the key moments, for sure.
Make sure you find it right.
Everything has sacrifice, and they understand that.
Well, they certainly won't run out of things to do in the city here. Luckily, you spent at least 1 or 2 winters in Chicago, so you know what that weather is like. Well, listen, Eduardo Luz, I told you that we'd keep this right on time. I appreciate you finding literally the time. I know that we had to squeeze this in between a bunch of other stuff that you've got going on. It's been an absolute pleasure meeting you. It's been a pleasure getting to know you. I appreciate you living to your word and offering to come back in and join us for this season 3. There's some great insight from there, and congratulations really on the success. Moving up from a CMO to a CEO position is an incredible opportunity that many aspire to, and just beyond inspiring, you actually did it.
Fantastic. Thanks for having me again.
Listen, if you want to find out more about Eduardo Luz, do what I did. Just stalk him on LinkedIn just a bit. If you want to find out more about 8Greens, obviously they're online. It's really an amazing product. You should definitely check it out. I'm assuming the website is back up and operational today. It's great to have a great IT team. And thanks again for my team for helping us wrap another episode of the CMO Suite.
Thanks for hanging out in the CMO Suite, the podcast for marketers who want to be in the know, presented by Connectivity Holdings.
You're a C-level manager. You shouldn't have to know the difference between behavioral or contextual targeting, but your agency should. Uconnect provides brands and biddable teams direct access to platforms like The Trade Desk, Google, Amazon, Facebook, OTT, and more. Their US-based traders can train your in-house team or provide complete transparency with no minimums and CPM-based service pricing for true transparency. Something Mighty Hive, The Trade Desk, and Centro simply don't offer. Tired of being the smartest one in the room? Reach out to Uconnect today for a free demo. Uconnect, the world's leader in true transparent biddable media.